What's up everybody, it's Yubi back with another video. Today I'm going to be discussing some DevOps basics. A lot of you guys have reached out to me asking how do you become a DevOps engineer and what do you need to know. So I'm going to start off with this series and show you guys an introduction to Git and version control. So today we're going to be discussing what exactly is Git and what is version control, why do you use version control, and how is it used in the context of DevOps and software development in general. But before we begin, you will need to download and install the Git command line interface or CLI. There's a link in the video description for Mac and Windows installs. So to get started, let's talk about what is Git. Git is a version control system that developers use all over the world. It helps you track different versions of your code and collaborate with other developers. Now it's important to remember that Git and GitHub are two different things. Git is a command line tool that's downloaded locally on your machine, while GitHub is a product that allows you to host your Git projects on a remote server somewhere, or in other words, in the cloud. This will make more sense later on in the video. Okay, so rather than explain why we use Git and GitHub and DevOps and why it's important, I figured I'd just show you guys an example of how to use it and set up a basic GitHub repository and show you some Git commands so that you guys can get the context and understand it a little bit more clearly. But before we begin, right now, open your terminal or command line. You can search for it on Mac by just typing in terminal like so, and it'll open. But let's verify that we have Git installed on our machine correctly. So let's type in git -- version, and you should see output like this confirming that you have a Git version installed on your machine. Okay, so next what we want to do is go to github.com, and it's free to sign up if you want to create an account. And what we want to do is create a new repository, which is basically just a project where we store all of the files that we want to version control. So from here, basically what I did was I just go to the plus sign up here, new repository, and I name my repository Learn DevOps, as you can see up here. And that just creates an empty repository, so no files yet. And what we want to do is go down to this link here where we can copy the address to our GitHub repo. And what we want to do is open up Visual Studio Code, and that's just a text editor or file editor, just like Microsoft Word, but we use it primarily for code. Okay, so now what we're going to do is open up Visual Studio Code, and as you can see, I just have my terminal open within Visual Studio Code. And what we want to do is use a command called git clone, and what we want to do is paste the address to our repo that we just created. The git clone command is just going to copy an existing repo that is on GitHub to our local machine. So I cloned it and it's okay. We get this warning, you appear to have cloned an empty repository. That's fine because we haven't actually created any new files for it yet. So now what I want to do, since I've successfully cloned my repo, is open up that folder in Visual Studio Code. So I'll go to File, Open, and I will go to my Learn DevOps folder. Go ahead and open it. And now what I want to go ahead and do is, let's say if I joined a new development team and my boss wants me to work on this Learn DevOps repo along with the rest of my team. This is where we're all pushing our files and our changes to the project. So first thing I want to do is create a branch where all of my work is going to be located, and mine alone. So let's say my name is Joe and I'm a developer that's working on this new project. I would create my own branch by using the command git checkout -b for branch, and then let's name the branch Joe's branch. So now I'm on Joe's branch, and let's say I wanted to write a new file for this branch. What I would do is come in here and create a new file, and let's just keep it simple. Let's make a text file, and let's see, we'll just write in here, hey, this is Joe's text file. And we'll go ahead and save it, and we'll save it as joe.txt since it's just a text file. Boom. So now in this Learn DevOps repo, we have a file called joe.text. All right, so let's say I'm done with it and I want to push my changes back up to GitHub. What I would do is come in here and I would say git add and then space, and then I'm just going to put a period for all of the files that are currently in this repository. And then I'm going to use the git commit command -m for message, and I want to commit these changes so that I can push them up into the GitHub repository where the rest of my team's files are. And I'm going to leave a message, so I'll just put it in quotes and I'll say added joe.txt. And lastly, I just want to run the git push, which will push these changes up to GitHub. And it's going to say that I need to set the upstream branch. So I just need to tell it which branch needs to get set to be pushed up. And that is now pushed. So now if I go back to github.com and I refresh the repository, you'll now see I have Joe's branch here. So these are where my branches are. And there's a file in here now, joe.txt, along with my commit message that I left, which was me, and says added joe.txt. So cool. That's where I made my local changes, and then I pushed them up into the repository. So now other people can see them and review them and make changes and collaborate. Okay, so let's say we have another developer join the team, and her name is Sarah, and her boss tells her to work with Joe, who's also new to the team, and they're supposed to work together on the Learn DevOps repository. So Joe tells her, hey, welcome to the team. Go ahead and work off the main branch, which doesn't have anything in it, and you can just start making your changes there, and then you can push your changes up, and then eventually we'll both merge both of our changes together to this main branch. So she says, okay, let me do that. So what she does is she comes in here and she says, git check out the main branch. And Joe says, good. Now what you want to do is make your own branch off of main, and you can just call it Sarah's branch. So she does git checkout -b, and she calls it Sarah's branch. And then she comes into her editor and she says, okay, I'm going to make my own txt file. So I'm going to call this sarah.txt, and it's going to say, hey, this file is Sarah's. And she saves it, and Joe's like, hey, that looks good. And she's like, okay, I'm ready to push my changes up. So she does a git add, and then a period for the current context of the current directory. So she wants to add all of the current files that were added on this branch in the current directory. She does git add, and then she does a git commit because she's committing those changes, and she says added sarah.txt. And then she's gonna push it, and she's gonna set her upstream branch to Sarah's branch using the recommended command here. And she pushes it up, and then she goes back to the Learn DevOps repository, and you can see she's made some pushes here. And let's see, now if we go to Sarah's branch, we should see sarah.txt. And yep, there's the contents of the file. Cool. So now Joe's changes are up into the repository, and Sarah's changes are also ready in the repository. So what we want to do now is open up a request, what's called a pull request, so that we can get both of those branches merged together into our main branch. So I'm going to open a pull request here, And you'll see Sarah's branch had recent pushes, and you can compare and pull requests here. And you'll see a description of the changes. So added sarah.txt. And so our base branch is actually going to be main, since that's where we want to target Sarah's branch to go into main. And so she'd open up that pull request. And what would happen is her boss would look at the file changes and say, okay, yeah, she added sarah.txt and this is what she added to it. All right, yeah, that looks good. And the boss would come over here and they would say, all right, yeah, it looks good. I'm gonna go ahead and approve it. They would hit submit review, and then the pull request would be eligible to be merged, and they would merge it in. So now if we look at the main branch, we can see sarah.txt is now here. And you can see an update of the commit and which branch it was added from. And yeah, so that's ready. That looks good. And Joe also says that his changes are ready to get merged into the main branch. So he comes in here and he opens a new pull request. And he also wants to add to the main branch. And you can see, okay, these are his changes. He's added joe.txt with the contents of this file. He opens a pull request. So he would just add a title here. It said added joe.txt. Open a pull request. His boss would look at the changes and say, okay, cool, yeah, that looks good. Approve it. And merge it into main. So now if we look at main, we can see main now contains both joe.txt and sarah.txt. So that's two separate developers working on their own branches, and now their work has come together on a separate branch, the main branch, where sometimes you refer to this as the master branch, and now their work is combined. So they've collaborated, people have reviewed their code changes and said that it looks good, and now we have a history of all the changes that they've made on their respective branches, so we can see the different versions as they pertain to each respective branch. And that's how collaboration happens with GitHub. Now these are a simple example of just using TXT files, but the same thing applies to code files, whether they're JavaScript files or Python files. The same process is going to happen. You're going to make a branch for whatever feature that you're trying to create or whatever code that you're trying to write, and you're going to make your changes and you're going to push them up into the repository into a specified branch. You're going to open pull request. Somebody who's more senior than you or a boss or a manager is going to review that code, and they're going to give you feedback on if you need to change anything or if it looks good, and then it's going to get merged in. All right, you guys, so hopefully you have a better understanding of why developers use version control. They use it as a safety net to protect the source code from irreparable harm, giving the development team the freedom to experiment without fear of causing damage or creating code conflicts. So I hope you guys have a better understanding of why we're using Git, how we use it, and what it actually is. If you guys found this information helpful, please feel free to like and subscribe. I'll be making more videos on DevOps basics in the future. So I will talk to you guys later. Thanks again for watching.